It was a cold evening, and the sky was heavy with dark clouds that threatened to pour rain at any moment. The streets were almost empty, and the few people walking by hurried along, heads down, trying to avoid the biting wind. On the corner of a quiet street near an old bus stop, a young boy sat huddled in a thin, worn-out jacket. His clothes were dirty, and his shoes had holes that let the cold seep in. He shivered slightly, hugging himself for warmth, and his eyes darted around nervously every time someone passed. Most people barely noticed him, or if they did, they looked away quickly. Some even crossed the street to avoid getting too close. The boy had grown used to being invisible, to being someone that the world ignored. He had learned that asking for help usually brought nothing but cold looks or harsh words. Hunger and loneliness had become familiar companions, but even they could not prepare him for the hopeless feeling that seemed to grow in his chest every day. As he sat there, lost in thought, a car pulled up nearby and stopped. A man stepped out. He was tall and wore a simple suit, not fancy but neat, with a calm, confident presence. He looked around, and when his eyes fell on the boy, he didn't look away like everyone else. Instead, he walked over holding an umbrella and stood quietly for a moment. He didn't say anything at first. He just looked at the boy with a gentle expression, the kind of look that made the boy feel like someone really saw him for the first time in a long while. The boy's first instinct was to shrink back, to protect himself from disappointment. He had been let down so many times that trusting someone felt dangerous. But something about this man was different. There was no judgment in his eyes, only curiosity and concern. He knelt down slightly, holding the umbrella over the boy so that the rain didn't touch him. "Are you okay?" the man asked softly. His voice was calm, steady, and kind, like a warm blanket on a freezing night. The boy hesitated, unsure if he should answer. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Words felt heavy and unnecessary. The man waited patiently, giving him time to speak. Finally, after a long pause, the boy whispered, "I'm fine." It wasn't true, but it was what he had been trained to say. The man didn't press him. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small paper bag. "I have some food here," he said, "if you want it." He placed it gently on the bench beside the boy. The boy stared at the bag. It smelled like bread and something warm and familiar, something he hadn't tasted in days. He wanted to take it, but pride and fear held him back. He had learned that accepting help could come with strings attached. But hunger was stronger than fear. Slowly, almost cautiously, he reached out and took the bag. He unwrapped it carefully, as if it might disappear if he wasn't careful, and peeked inside. The warm food smelled comforting, filling a small corner of his empty stomach. "Thank you," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. The man smiled, a small, kind smile that didn't feel forced. "You're welcome. My name is Pastor," he said. "I know it's not much, but it's a start." He didn't ask the boy for anything in return. He didn't lecture or scold. He just offered kindness, and that was something the boy had almost forgotten existed. They sat there together for a while, sharing the quiet, letting the sound of the rain fill the space between them. The boy felt a strange mixture of relief and anxiety. Relief because someone finally cared, and anxiety because he wasn't sure how long it would last. People like him rarely got second chances, and he had been burned too many times before. "Where are you staying tonight?" the pastor asked gently. The boy looked away, ashamed. "Nowhere," he admitted. The word felt heavy on his tongue. He didn't even have a bench to call home. He slept wherever he could find a corner, a doorway, or a safe spot that might protect him from the elements. The pastor nodded, understanding more than the boy expected. He didn't recoil or make him feel small. Instead, he took the boy by the shoulder, a firm but gentle grip. "You don't have to stay out here tonight," he said. "I can find a place for you to sleep safely." The boy's eyes widened, a mixture of disbelief and hope shining through. You would do that?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. The pastor nodded. "Yes, no one should be out here alone in the cold." It wasn't an immediate solution, but it was the first step. The pastor led the boy to his car, offering warmth and dry clothes he kept in the back. They drove quietly, the rain tapping softly on the roof of the car, and the boy felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Safety. It wasn't just the car or the dry clothes. It was the feeling that someone truly cared. When they arrived at a small community center run by the church, the boy was hesitant. It wasn't a fancy place, just a simple building with a few beds and warm blankets, but it felt like the first home he had ever known. The pastor introduced him to a few kind people there, volunteers who smiled and welcomed him without judgment. For the first time, the boy felt like he belonged somewhere, even if only for one night. Before leaving, the pastor knelt down again and looked the boy in the eyes. "I'll check on you tomorrow," he said. "And the next day. You don't have to do this alone." The boy nodded, a lump forming in his throat. No one had ever said that to him before. No one had ever told him he didn't have to face the world by himself. That night, as he lay under the warm blanket, the boy thought about the man who had reached out to him in the rain. He thought about the small kindness, the warm food, the safe place to sleep. It wasn't much, but it was enough to spark a feeling he hadn't felt in years: hope. And hope, fragile as it was, had the power to grow into something much bigger. Outside, the rain continued to fall, but inside, a small corner of the world felt different. A boy who had believed he was invisible realized that maybe, just maybe, someone had seen him, and that someone didn't just see him, they cared. That night marked the beginning of a new chapter. The boy didn't know what the future would hold or how long this kindness would last. But for the first time in his life, he felt that someone believed in him. It was a small step, just one act of care in a world that often ignored him. But it was enough to change everything. Little did the boy know, this meeting on a cold, rainy night would set the foundation for a bond that would last for years. The pastor's simple act of protection, patience, and kindness would stay with him forever, shaping the choices he made, the person he became, and the life he would one day build. And though the boy didn't realize it yet, one day he would return that kindness in a way neither of them could have imagined. After that first night in the warm shelter, the boy woke up feeling strange. It wasn't just the comfort of a bed or the warmth of blankets. It was the feeling that someone cared. The pastor had promised to check on him, and true to his word, he arrived early that morning, a gentle smile on his face. He didn't rush or push, just stood at the doorway waiting patiently for the boy to notice him. "Good morning," he said softly. "Did you sleep well?" The boy nodded, still cautious. He had learned not to trust too easily. People said kind words all the time, but many of them disappeared when it was time to help for real. The pastor seemed different, though. There was no rush, no expectation, just patience. Over the next few days, the pastor returned, bringing not just food but small necessities: clean socks, a sweater, and even a small bag with toiletries. It wasn't about charity. It was about dignity. He never made the boy feel like he owed anything. He simply offered help and guidance, giving the boy a choice to accept or not. The boy began to open up slowly. At first, it was small things: how the wind felt too cold or how the food at the shelter tasted better than he expected. Then gradually, he shared pieces of his story. He talked about being left alone, about the nights he spent sleeping on benches and the fear that people like him were always destined to be forgotten. The pastor listened without interrupting. He didn't judge or scold. Instead, he nodded, sometimes offering a word of comfort. "You've been through a lot," he said gently. "But that doesn't define who you are. You can choose a different path, one step at a time." Those words felt strange to the boy. No one had ever told him he had a choice. The world had always seemed like a place where he had to survive, not live. Now he realized there might be something more. Hope, perhaps, or at least the possibility of a life that didn't feel like constant struggle. As days turned into weeks, the pastor began introducing the boy to the community around him. Volunteers at the shelter greeted him warmly, offering smiles and encouragement. Other children who had faced hardships shared their experiences, creating a sense of belonging that the boy had never known. He began to understand that he wasn't alone, that there were people who wanted to see him succeed, not just survive. The pastor also taught him small life lessons. He showed him how to take care of his belongings, how to ask for help without feeling ashamed, and even how to manage the little money he earned from odd jobs. The boy listened carefully, realizing that these were skills people took for granted, but for him they were precious tools that could shape his future. But it wasn't always easy. The boy had bad days, moments when the weight of his past threatened to pull him back into despair. Sometimes he would argue with the pastor, refusing help out of fear or frustration. "I can do it myself," he would say, though his voice trembled. The pastor never reacted with anger. He would just sit quietly, letting the boy vent, offering comfort when the words ran out. "You don't have to do it alone. The pastor reminded him again, gently but firmly. Even the strongest people need someone to lean on sometimes. Slowly, trust began to grow. The boy realized that the pastor wasn't just a fleeting presence in his life. He was consistent, reliable, and patient. He didn't disappear when things got difficult. He didn't demand anything in return. He simply cared, and that care began to reshape the boy's understanding of the world. One day, the pastor suggested something that surprised the boy. "There's a program at the local community center," he said. "It helps young people like you learn new skills and prepare for school or work. Would you like to try it?" The boy hesitated. Change was scary. He had spent so long surviving day by day that thinking about the future felt overwhelming. But the pastor's calm encouragement gave him courage. I'll try," he whispered. At the center, the boy met mentors who taught him basic reading, writing, and problem-solving skills. They were patient and kind, but also firm when needed. The boy began to see a different side of himself, a side capable of learning, growing, and achieving. It was a new world, one that required effort, yes, but also offered rewards he had never imagined. The pastor didn't just provide access to these programs. He walked alongside the boy. He attended meetings with him, celebrated small victories, and comforted him after setbacks. When the boy felt discouraged because a task was too hard, the pastor reminded him, "Every small step counts. You're building something important, even if it doesn't feel like it right now." As trust grew, the boy began sharing deeper parts of his life. He spoke about his family, the struggles he faced at home, and the loneliness that had become part of him. The pastor listened patiently, never judging or dismissing his feelings. He offered perspective, guidance, and above all, empathy. "You've survived a lot on your own," the pastor said one afternoon. "That shows strength. But strength isn't just about fighting alone. It's also about accepting help, learning, and growing. You can be strong and supported at the same time." The boy began to understand that this wasn't charity. It was mentorship, something that would prepare him for life. The pastor's care was like a bridge, connecting him from a life of survival to a life of possibilities. For the first time, he began to dream, not just about food or shelter, but about a future where he could build, create, and belong. Outside the shelter, life continued to be challenging. The boy still encountered people who judged him for his clothes, his past, or his appearance. Some days he still felt the pull of despair. But now he had a foundation of support. He had someone who believed in him, someone who had seen his potential even when he couldn't see it himself. That belief became a lifeline. The pastor also taught him about kindness, not just receiving it, but giving it. "Helping others doesn't have to be big," he said. "Even a smile, a word, or a small action can change someone's day." Slowly, the boy began to practice this. He helped younger children at the shelter, shared his food, and offered encouragement to peers who were struggling. In giving, he discovered a new sense of purpose and confidence. One evening, after a long day at the community center, the boy sat with the pastor outside the shelter. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the streets. The boy felt a strange mix of gratitude, hope, and disbelief. He had come so far, and yet he remembered the nights on the cold streets with painful clarity. "Thank you," he said quietly. I don't know where I'd be without you." The pastor smiled, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You've done all the hard work," he said. "I only walked with you. The courage was always inside you. You just needed someone to believe it too." The boy realized then that the pastor had given him more than shelter or food. He had given him trust, patience, and a vision for a life that didn't have to be defined by pain. That simple human connection, the feeling of being truly seen, was a gift he would carry forever. As the weeks turned into months, the boy's confidence grew. He attended school programs regularly, learned new skills, and even began helping around the shelter. The relationship with the pastor had become one of mutual respect and care. It was not a relationship of dependency but of guidance, mentorship, and shared humanity. Through it all, the boy began to understand something profound. That one act of kindness, repeated consistently, could transform a life. The pastor's patience, his willingness to listen, to guide, and to protect, created a foundation the boy could build upon. He began to imagine a future where he could rise above the circumstances that had once defined him. And even though the boy didn't realize it yet, The lessons he was learning, the value of trust, the power of kindness, and the strength found in guidance, would shape his life in ways he could not yet see. The bond between the boy and the pastor, fragile at first, was growing into something unbreakable, a connection that would stand the test of time. By now, the boy had begun to settle into a new rhythm. The shelter was no longer a strange temporary place, but a small community where he felt accepted. He woke up each morning with a mix of anticipation and nervousness. His days were filled with learning new skills, attending programs, and meeting people who encouraged him to do better. Every small achievement felt monumental, like climbing a mountain step by step. The pastor remained a constant presence. He would arrive each day, check on the boy, and share words of encouragement. Sometimes he would bring small surprises, a book, a notebook, or even just a cup of warm cocoa. It wasn't about gifts. It was about showing that someone believed in him. Someone thought he mattered enough to notice the little things. One day, the pastor introduced the boy to a mentor from a local program. The mentor was kind and patient, someone who had worked with young people in difficult situations for years. "This is a chance for you to learn skills that can change your life," the pastor explained. "It won't be easy, but I know you can do it." The boy felt nervous. Change was scary, even when it promised something better. He remembered the streets, the hunger and the fear, and a part of him doubted that he could ever leave that life behind completely. But the pastor's steady presence reassured him. "I'll be with you," the pastor said. Every step. The program began slowly. The boy learned basic skills, reading, writing, and math, things he had struggled with in the past. He also learned practical life skills, managing money, preparing simple meals, keeping track of schedules, and communicating respectfully with others. At first it was overwhelming. There were moments when he felt like giving up, thinking it was too much or too late for him to catch up. But each time he faltered, the pastor was there to guide him. "It's okay to struggle," he said one afternoon after the boy became frustrated with a writing exercise. "Everyone starts somewhere. What matters is that you keep trying. Every small effort counts." Gradually, the boy began to notice changes in himself. He felt more confident speaking in front of others, more capable of completing tasks he once thought impossible. His mind, once clouded with worry and despair, began to focus on possibilities. He started dreaming about a future where he could live with dignity, help others, and make something of himself. The pastor also took time to teach him about choices. Life, he explained, was full of paths, and every decision had consequences. "You may be tempted to take shortcuts," the pastor said one evening, "but the right path is often the harder one. It's the path that builds who you are, not just what you achieve." The boy listened carefully, beginning to understand that his past did not define him. He had made mistakes and life had been harsh, but he could choose a different path now. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about creating a life he could be proud of. At the same time, the boy faced challenges that tested his new perspective. Old friends from the streets tried to pull him back into risky habits. Sometimes he felt lonely, missing the familiarity of the streets even as he learned to embrace new routines. There were days when he questioned whether he truly belonged in this new world. The pastor never pushed him but offered guidance through these challenges. "It's normal to feel torn," he said. "Old habits die hard, and people from your past may not understand your growth. But remember, you are choosing a better life. That choice is yours, and no one can take it from you." Slowly, the boy began to see the value of structure and discipline. He started keeping a small journal, writing down his thoughts, goals, and achievements. The pastor encouraged this, saying, "Writing helps you understand yourself. It reminds you of how far you've come and what you want to become." He also began to notice how helping others gave him a sense of purpose. The shelter was filled with younger children who looked up to him, people who had faced struggles similar to his own. When he shared advice, helped with chores, or offered comfort, he felt a growing sense of responsibility. He was no longer just a recipient of care. He was becoming someone who could support and inspire others. One day, the pastor suggested a special opportunity. "There's a program in town that teaches hands-on skills," he explained. "It's not just about learning a trade. It's about preparing for independence and building confidence. I think you're ready to try it." The boy hesitated. Change was scary, and the thought of stepping into a completely new environment filled him with anxiety. "What if I fail?" he asked quietly. "You won't," the pastor replied. You might stumble, but that's part of learning. I'll be with you and I believe in you. You've already proven that you can handle more than most people think. Encouraged by the pastor's words, the boy joined the program. He learned practical skills like carpentry, basic electronics, and even small business management. Each day brought new challenges, but also new accomplishments. Every completed project, every small success strengthened his confidence. He began to feel capable not just of surviving, but of thriving. Through all of this, the pastor remained a guiding presence. He didn't just teach skills. He taught life lessons. He emphasized honesty, perseverance, empathy, and respect. Skills are important, he said one day, but character is what carries you through life when skills aren't enough. Never lose sight of who you are and how you treat others. The boy began to see the wisdom in these words. He noticed how his peers in the program responded to him differently now. They respected him not just for what he could do, but for the way he treated them. The boy realized that the pastor's guidance had helped him grow in ways he hadn't even recognized. Yet the boy also faced moments of doubt. There were days when he compared himself to others, feeling inadequate or behind. But the pastor had anticipated this. Your journey is yours alone, he reminded him. Don't measure yourself against others. Focus on your progress, your growth, and your choices. That is what truly matters. With each passing day, the boy began to envision a life beyond the shelter. He started thinking about goals, dreams, and possibilities he had never considered before. He imagined having a stable home, a job he could be proud of, and a life where he could help others who were struggling like he once had. The pastor encouraged these dreams, reinforcing the idea that they were achievable through dedication and perseverance. The bond between the boy and the pastor grew stronger. It was no longer just a relationship of care and support. It had evolved into one of mentorship and mutual respect. The boy trusted the pastor implicitly, sharing fears, hopes, and ambitions without fear of judgment. And the pastor in turn continued to guide him, offering wisdom, patience, and encouragement at every step. One afternoon, as they walked through the city streets together, the boy paused and said quietly, "I feel like I'm finally starting to understand who I can be." The pastor smiled, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You've always had it in you," he said. "I only helped you see it. Now it's your turn to keep building it every day." The boy realized then that he had changed more than he thought. He was no longer just a homeless child struggling to survive. He was a young person learning to navigate the world with guidance, hope, and determination. The pastor's mentorship had given him tools, confidence, and a sense of purpose. And though the road ahead would still be challenging, he now felt ready to face it. The lessons learned during these months would stay with him forever. Patience, resilience, empathy, and the power of guidance had transformed the boy in ways he had never imagined. The pastor had not just provided opportunities, he had nurtured growth, instilled confidence, and shown the boy that life could be more than survival. It could be meaningful, purposeful, and filled with hope. And even though the boy didn't yet realize it, these experiences were laying the foundation for a future where he would not only repay the kindness he had received, but also pass it forward, changing lives just as his mentor had changed his years past, and the boy slowly transformed into a young man. The days at the shelter, the programs, and the mentorship of the pastor had changed him deeply. He was no longer the frightened child huddled at a bus stop in the rain. He had learned resilience, patience, and the power of hard work. Every skill he had acquired, every lesson he had learned, had been a step toward building a life he could be proud of. The young man had secured a steady job through the guidance he had received. It wasn't a high-paying position, but it gave him stability and a sense of independence he had never known before. For the first time in his life, he was able to plan, save, and even think about the future. He rented a small apartment, furnished simply but comfortably, and began to experience the dignity of living in his own space. The streets and shelters were behind him, replaced by a home where he could rest without fear. Even as life became more structured, he never forgot the pastor who had changed his path. The man's kindness, patience, and guidance had given him opportunities that he could never have imagined. He often thought about the rainy evening when he had first met the pastor, the food, the warm coat, and the gentle words that had sparked hope in his heart. Those memories were precious reminders that one act of care could alter the course of a life. The young man also began to think about giving back. He knew that his life had been saved, in a sense, by the guidance and protection he had received. The pastor had invested time, effort, and love in him without expecting anything in return. That thought stayed with him constantly. He wanted to honor that generosity, not just with words but with meaningful action. However, the journey to adulthood wasn't without challenges. The young man faced moments of doubt, the pressure of bills, and the struggles of adapting to life beyond the shelter. There were days when the past seemed to linger, memories of hunger, fear, and loneliness threatening to pull him down. Yet he remembered the lessons the pastor had taught him: resilience, patience, and the importance of making the right choices. Those lessons were now his foundation, helping him navigate difficulties with courage and clarity. As he became more stable, he began to build relationships with others outside the shelter. He connected with colleagues, neighbors, and friends, gradually learning how to trust again. While he remained humble about his past, he no longer felt ashamed. Instead, he carried a quiet pride, a recognition that his journey had shaped him into someone strong, compassionate, and capable. The young man also dedicated time to personal growth. He enrolled in evening classes to further his education, worked on new skills to improve his career prospects, and spent hours volunteering at local shelters and community centers. Helping others gave him a sense of purpose and allowed him to honor the lessons of empathy and service that the pastor had instilled in him. Each act of kindness he performed felt like a small repayment, a way to carry forward the spirit of generosity that had once lifted him from despair. Despite the years and the distance from his initial hardships, the young man never forgot the man who had first extended a hand. He knew that a single meeting, a single act of care had set in motion all the progress in his life. That realization filled him with gratitude and a sense of responsibility. He understood that true repayment wasn't just about giving material gifts, but about living a life that reflected the values and lessons he had received. The pastor, now older and still deeply involved in his community, continued to mentor others. He never sought recognition or reward, simply offering guidance to those in need. The young man admired him more than ever. The consistency, the patience, and the unwavering kindness of the pastor had taught him that genuine care was transformative. That lesson became central to his own life philosophy. One day, the young man decided it was time to reconnect. He had achieved stability, cultivated his skills, and prepared himself to honor the pastor's role in his life. It wasn't just about gratitude. It was about completing a circle of care. He wanted to show the pastor that the investment of time and love had not been in vain. He arrived at the church early in the morning, the same calm and quiet neighborhood where he had first met the pastor. The building looked familiar yet different, carrying the weight of many years of service and community work. The young man felt a flutter of nerves. He wondered how the pastor would react, if he would remember the small, timid boy he had once helped. When the pastor appeared, walking down the steps with his usual gentle smile, the young man felt a rush of emotion. Time had passed, yet the warmth and kindness in the pastor's eyes were unchanged. The young man stepped forward, his voice steady but filled with feeling. "I wanted to thank you," he said simply, "for everything, for seeing me when no one else did." The pastor's eyes softened and he opened his arms. "I've thought about you often," he said. "I always hoped you were doing well." The young man smiled, feeling a weight lift from his chest. He knew then that this moment, this reunion, was a culmination of years of effort, growth, and guidance. The young man shared his journey, explaining how the skills, lessons, and encouragement had shaped his life. He talked about his job, his apartment, his continued education, and the volunteering he had undertaken. He spoke not with pride but with gratitude, emphasizing that none of it would have been possible without the pastor's support. The pastor listened quietly, nodding and occasionally smiling, clearly moved by the story. "You've done well," he said finally. "But remember, it wasn't just about what I did. You made the choices, took the steps, and worked hard. I'm proud of the person you've become." The young man had also brought a small gift, symbolic rather than extravagant. It was a token of respect, a tangible expression of the gratitude he felt. But beyond the gift, the most meaningful gesture was his presence, standing there as a testament to the transformative power of care, guidance, and human connection. The reunion was more than a moment of gratitude. It was a reminder that lives could be changed by patience, kindness, and consistent support. The young man had been given a chance, nurtured and guided, and he had responded by building a life that reflected those values. As they spoke, The young man realized that the cycle of care was not just about receiving, but also about giving back. He had learned that the true measure of gratitude is not simply words but actions that honor the lessons and sacrifices of those who helped you. He vowed silently to carry forward the legacy of the pastor's kindness, helping others who were lost, struggling, or in need of guidance. The pastor, too, recognized the moment for what it was, a confirmation of the impact one person could have on another. His consistent patient care had created a ripple effect, touching not just the boy he had helped but countless others the young man would now influence. It was a moment of quiet joy, a testament to the power of human connection. As the young man left the church that day, he felt a profound sense of fulfillment. He had completed a journey that began with fear, loneliness, and uncertainty. He had grown into someone capable, responsible, and compassionate. And he had done it without forgetting the hands that had lifted him, the guidance that had shaped him, and the patience that had transformed him. The pastor watched him leave with a smile, knowing that the boy he had once protected had become a man who would now continue the cycle of care. The story was far from over. It was simply entering a new chapter, one where the lessons of kindness, guidance, and trust would continue to ripple outward, changing lives in ways that neither could yet fully imagine. Years of struggle, mentorship, and growth had culminated in this moment, proving that even a single act of care could transform a life, create opportunities, and inspire a legacy of giving. And for the young man, the realization was clear. He would never forget where he came from, who had helped him rise, and the responsibility he now carried to honor that kindness every day of his life. The day finally came when the young man felt ready to repay the kindness that had shaped his life. For years he had carried the memory of that rainy evening, the warmth of the shelter and the patience of the pastor who had never given up on him. It wasn't just gratitude. It was a deep understanding that someone had believed in him when no one else did, and that belief had changed the course of his life. He carefully planned the visit, wanting it to be meaningful. He had brought more than words. He had brought a tangible way to show the pastor that his guidance had been life-changing. The young man arrived at the church early in the morning, the streets quiet, the air crisp with the promise of a new day. He paused for a moment outside, taking in the familiar building where so much of his transformation had begun. Memories flooded back, the shivering nights, the meals shared, the lessons learned, and the trust slowly built. When the pastor stepped out to greet him, the young man felt a mix of emotions: nervousness, anticipation, and overwhelming gratitude. The pastor's smile was calm and warm, just as it had been all those years ago. "It's good to see you," the pastor said softly, his eyes reflecting genuine care. The young man stepped forward, feeling the weight of every year, every lesson, and every struggle. "I wanted to thank you," he began, "for everything you did for me. You saved my life in more ways than one." His voice trembled slightly, but it carried a depth of emotion that words alone could not express. The pastor nodded, his expression softening. "I'm proud of you," he said. "You've come so far and you've made the right choices. That's what matters most." The young man handed the pastor a carefully wrapped gift. It wasn't extravagant, but it was meaningful, a symbol of the life he had built and the respect he felt. Inside was a collection of small items, a journal, a framed photograph of the young man in his apartment, and a note describing how the pastor's kindness had inspired him to give back to others. The gift was more than a present. It was a testament to the ripple effect of care and guidance. The pastor accepted it with humility, his eyes glistening slightly. "You didn't have to do this," he said, "but it means a lot to me that you remembered." They sat together on a bench outside the church, the morning sunlight spilling over the streets. The young man shared his journey in detail, how he had secured a steady job, rented his own apartment, continued his education, and begun helping others in the community. He described how each lesson from the pastor had guided his decisions, shaped his character, and inspired him to live a life of purpose. The pastor listened quietly, nodding and occasionally offering gentle words of encouragement. "You've done well," he said finally. "But remember, it wasn't just about what I did. You made the effort, took the steps, and kept moving forward even when it was hard. That's your strength." The young man smiled, feeling a profound sense of fulfillment. For the first time, he felt that the circle was complete. The pastor had offered guidance and care without expecting anything in return, and now the young man could show that the impact of that kindness had not been lost. As they talked, they noticed children from the community gathering nearby. Some were playing, others were helping with small tasks, and a few were learning from mentors like the pastor. The young man realized that the cycle of kindness was continuing. Just as he had once been lifted by care and guidance, these children were now being shaped by the same principles: patience, support, and encouragement. The pastor turned to him and said, "The true reward of what I do isn't recognition or thanks. It's seeing someone like you grow and continue the cycle. That's why I do this work." The young man nodded, understanding more deeply than ever. "I promise to keep it going," he said. "I want to help others the way you helped me, so that no one feels alone and so that they know someone believes in them." The pastor's eyes filled with pride. "That's all I could hope for," he replied. "You're carrying forward something much bigger than yourself now. That's the real repayment." For hours they talked, sharing memories and reflections. The young man recounted moments of doubt, struggles he had overcome, and lessons that had shaped his decisions. Each story was a reminder of the challenges he had faced and the resilience he had developed. And the pastor shared his own perspective, emphasizing that the young man's success was a combination of guidance and personal determination. Eventually, the conversation shifted to the future. The young man spoke about his plans to expand his efforts in the community, to mentor other children who were struggling, and to create programs that would offer the same opportunities he had received. He wanted to make sure that no child felt invisible, that no one went hungry or feared for their safety. The pastor listened with quiet satisfaction, recognizing the impact of his mentorship multiplied through the young man's dedication. As the afternoon sun began to dip toward the horizon, the young man and the pastor stood together, looking out at the neighborhood that had witnessed their journey. It was a quiet moment filled with reflection, gratitude, and a shared understanding that one act of kindness could ripple through a lifetime. The young man finally said, "I couldn't have done any of this without you. You didn't just help me survive. You helped me live." The pastor placed a hand on his shoulder. "And now you're helping others live too. That's the most beautiful part of all of this. The cycle continues, and it's stronger because of you." They embraced, a simple but profound gesture that spoke volumes. It wasn't just about repayment. It was about connection, growth, and the enduring power of compassion. The young man had come full circle, from a boy alone in the rain to someone capable of creating change and giving back. As he left the church that evening, the young man felt a deep sense of peace. He had honored the pastor's guidance not with grand gestures but with a life lived with purpose, empathy, and integrity. Every step he had taken, every choice he had made was a testament to the lessons learned and the trust placed in him years ago. The pastor watched him walk away, a quiet smile on his face. He knew that his role in the young man's life had been significant, but he also knew that the true power lay in the young man's choices. He had provided guidance, support, and protection, but it was the young man's courage, resilience, and determination that had turned opportunity into transformation. In the months and years that followed, the young man continued to thrive. He helped other children who were struggling, mentored those who had lost hope, and created programs that offered guidance, education, and support. The lessons of the pastor lived on through him, touching countless lives and creating a ripple effect that extended far beyond what either of them could have imagined. And while the young man never forgot the man who had changed his life, the pastor never sought recognition for his work. He continued his quiet efforts, mentoring, protecting, and guiding those who needed him, knowing that the true reward was the lives he helped transform. The story of the boy and the pastor is a testament to the power of human connection, kindness, and trust. It shows that one person's belief in another can alter the course of a life, create opportunities, and inspire a cycle of giving that extends for